Welcome to this training on distance learning in ESL for secondary level. This training is presented to you by Carolyn Murphy, PED consultant for the Centre de Services Scolaires de Laval, and Alexandra Coutelet, pedagogical consultant for the Centre de Services Scolaires specialized in IT.
So this is the plan for today. We are talking about competencies. We are talking about evaluation. We're talking about teaching. We're talking about distance learning, okay? But before we can actually speak about distance learning, we want to take a look and make sure that everybody's on the same page with regards to thinking about what tool I'm going to be using, why I'm going to be using it, and to be able to do that, well, we need to take a look very quickly at the tools that we have or the documents that are the official documents of the ministry. We're going to take a second and see year 2021 is different than all years. There's an element of evaluation. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take our 3 competencies that we have in English as a second language. We'll look at what we should be looking at, and then we will give you suggested tools for teaching that competency, as well as suggested tools or ways to collect traces for each of those competencies. Sound good? Is that okay for everyone? So if we look at the different tools, there is one thing that I wanted to share with you that I don't know if you had seen it or not. I sent an email with regards to this earlier this week. On the BV of the Centre de Services Scolaires, there's a section where you have resources and resources of vos CP. And when you click on that, it brings you to Anglais. And when you used to click on Anglais, some of you might have used this, some of you might not have used this, but it brings you to it brought you to a website. We have changed that, and we have created a new website just so that you know. I know that you still see my screen. Give me one moment. I'm going to stop the sharing because I want you to see that now when you go to that same place, I'm going to share the screen again so that you can see it. When you go to the same place on the BV, you will now end up on this website here, which is the CSL Centre de Services Scolaires website. And when you click on secondary, it brings you to a whole series of tools to help you with planning. All of the documents that you need for planning are there. The progression of learning for COVID is there. The framework is there. Everything we're going to be discussing today, tools for collecting evidence and so on and so forth. And you have a whole series of additional videos if ever you need them, if you want to look at them. Okay? So I just wanted to take a second to tell you that that is now online and available if you would like to, if you need it. Okay? Do you still see my PowerPoint here? Francis, you're the only face that I see right now, so I'm basing myself on you. Thank you. Okay, so you have that information on there. So as I mentioned before, one of the things that we do want to look at is before we plan any learning activity, we should be making the connections between the program of study, the progression of learning, and the reference framework. And I'm just mentioning this to remind everybody because sometimes we do have a tendency to just pick and grab activities. And then when we get to the end of the semester, we freak out a little bit because we don't have what we need to evaluate. So if we took the time to think about it before, well, we'll know what we need to be doing. So that's why we want to make sure that we go through these elements with you all today. Also, just so that you know, around 9:30-ish, we're going to have a 5-minute break, and around 10:30-ish as well. Okay, we're going to take little breaks throughout this morning together. I wanted to take a second to step back and to remind you that in 1960, there was a program of study, and there are some of you here today that have a lot of experience, and you were probably there when we were teaching this way. And some of you are a little bit newer, so we want to make sure that we cover everybody who's in the classroom with us today. In the 1960s, there's a program of study that was created where what was evaluated or what was taught was listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Each of those had specific objectives, and each of those were taught separately and independently. We eventually, in 2001, the government realized that it was a time to change, and we started looking at general competencies as something that the students need in their everyday life and trying to tie them into everything else that they do. So exploration and understanding of various dimensions of everyday life, the media, when you're watching movies, what links can we make with other cultures and different ways of thinking. And that is when they came out with the new competency-based program. And we encourage connections between learning and real life. And you'll notice that we also try to think about making connections between English and other disciplines that are being taught. And sometimes when I walk around or when I speak to teachers, I hear many times, yes, but French and English is different. I understand that French and English are different. However, at the same time, there are a lot of elements that are similar, and there are elements of the competencies like strategies, like processes that are taught both in French and in English. So if we were able to be speaking with our French teachers once in a while, well, we would be able to make sure that we're teaming up and teaching the students as much as we can transversely instead of just in tubes, you know, each of us in our own section. Okay. Alexandra, are we good with comments or questions? Because I don't see anything. I imagine so. I don't see everyone on my screen. Okay. Making connections, again, think about connections with the students, with what they're learning in English and everything that it connects them to. It connects them to the whole world. It connects them to the possibility of getting information through magazines, radio, television, ICT, everything that they have around them. There are different elements, and I'm going through this very, very quickly, guys. Bear with me, just so that we all are on the same page. The broad areas of learning, when you're looking at the program of study, we're talking about issues that are important to individuals and to society, to concern to young people. The ESL and the French, as I mentioned before, communicative competencies, which are being developed in both disciplines. Respect for others, strategies, resources, a variety of texts. Those are all things that are being done in more than one competency and that should be looked at or could be looked at by all the teachers that work together with the students. And of course, the 3 subject-specific competencies, which differently than what used to be done in the past, as in my slide before, we had reading, listening, writing. Those were 4 separate things. Well, as you all know, when you're teaching it now, they all kind of intertwine. And when we do activities, we try to find activities that we can combine all of those things together. Okay? So the PFEQ, of course, we talk about the strategies, the competencies, C1, which is the backdrop for everything else. C2, which is the exploration of text. They're constructing meaning and knowledge. In C3, we write, we produce, we express. Guided by the teacher, they receive help, they receive feedback. We try to do it in an atmosphere of respect. We're teaching them know how to be as well. And we're encouraging them to take risks and creativity. And this is through the process of their high school learning. There's the progression of learning. Of course, it gives us, and I'm again mentioning this, some of you know that these exist, but I've actually had some teachers tell me, oh, what is that document? So I'm going over them very, very quickly. In our progression of learning, further information and knowledge to be acquired, it shows us the broaden, the structure that they want, the knowledge and the competencies that must reinforce each other. And this program, progression of learning, exists for Cycle 1 Core, Enriched for Cycle 2 Core, and Enriched. I just noticed there's a little typo there. We can never be really reassured that grammar rules have been assimilated until it is used appropriately in a variety of texts that go beyond the confines of a repetitive targeted exercise. So it's not just about giving them quizzes, checking their grammar, giving them quizzes, checking their grammar. It's about taking them that step further into trying to write and to see the writing process. And Alexandra has a very good example of this that she'll share with you a bit later. The framework is the third document, which in combination with the program of study and the progression of learning will give you a total picture of what should be taught. And I took a little note here to remind you all as teachers that the Section 19 of the Education Act stipulates that teachers are entitled to select the means of evaluating the progress of students as to examine and assess continually and periodically the needs and achievement goals of every student entrusted in their care. So we're not talking about evaluation, one exam at the end of the school year. We're talking about evaluation that is done progressively throughout the session in all kinds of different ways. And some of the tools that you'll get from us today, you'll see that you'll appreciate them very much as evaluation tools. So 2021, I'm sure you'll all agree, a year like no other. In January 2021, the MEQ published Learning to be Prioritized, which is a document, a planning aid for teachers in an exceptional context. Teachers are, of course, invited to go beyond the elements presented in this document by drawing on official documents, in particular, the Quebec Education Program and the Progression of Learning. I wanted to mention this because, again, this morning, I received an email from a teacher saying in this document, the new apprentissage à prioriser, it says that I have to maximize, and I'm just going to take this sharing away here for a second. The document says that I have to put my efforts into C1, and the teacher was asking me, does that mean I don't have to teach anything else? I would like to hear your feedback with regards to that. If the ministry in this document has said the importance is put on C1, you can write it in the chat if you'd like, or you can tell me, what do you think about that? Should we be teaching and evaluating anything else? You can turn your mic on, lift your hand, or write it in the chat if you'd like. Anyone?
Yes.
Yes, Pascal?
I think I mean, in special ed, it might be a little different than in the core program, but using C1 as the most important mean of communication instead of writing, for me, is what I do. So I encourage students to talk about, discuss in small group different answers, and I walk around and I evaluate them instead of having them writing. But I know
Okay.
it's special that is different in a core program. I guess it goes with your students.
Okay.
But even if they do it orally, it can be C2 for me.
Absolutely. There's elements of that that can be taken from there, for sure, for sure. And should we stop at the elements that were identified by the this document, or should we continue building and continue doing what you had already started? Anyone else? This is not a you get a slap behind your head if you don't give the right answer.
40, 30, 30.
40, 30, 30. So you're saying that you continue to work with all of the different elements of the program.
Okay, my son went to English school here in NDG. He had a French program at his school. First couple of years, French teacher, everything was taught in French, all the subjects turned over to English. These poor souls get 1 hour and 10 days. Lucky to have 3. I don't hear much about the that program there in elementary 6 there anymore. So they're getting everything I can give them. And that's it. There's nothing else. I mean, there's no hocus pocus about it. I mean, it's 40, 30, 30. And
okay. I'm glad to hear that. I'm happy to hear that.
Nothing else.
Yep.
That's what it's all about.
Thank you. And I like that attitude. Dabia?
Yeah, I find it too hard, like, to only consider the C1, especially when the classes are mixed up, like enriched and core English. I don't have like 2 programs like in the same class. So I'm still evaluating C2 and C3, especially that after the first term, I just realized that some of the students are doing well, like in spoken English, but they almost using only informal English. Mm-hmm. When it comes to writing, it's too much below the level of Sec 4, for example. Mm-hmm. Some students just can't like conjugate the verb to be in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So
I understand.
There is a big difference. So I see it is very important, like, to not let C3 especially, and C2 also. There is a difference when they're watching videos and they're reading a text. Watching videos is they respond more to that, but when reading the same text on a video and on a paper, they have different like answers. So I find it is like it is still like important to stick
absolutely
to other competencies.
Absolutely, you're totally correct. You're totally correct. And I believe there's Vicky, right, who had a hand up.
Yeah, I do, but I think oh, doesn't Dabia have her hand before me?
She just answered.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's okay.
What I see, sorry, never mind. What I was gonna say is, I do like the, I agree with the 40, 30, 30, that part. But I find, given the restrictions that we have with COVID, I find there's a lot more flexibility with the C1 and how we can integrate a C2 in conversations and in reinvestment that can be done orally.
Yeah.
And I find, well, with my students, it sort of eases up a little bit on the feeling of that pressure of constantly being evaluated, because I'm really 50% in class and 50% online.
Excellent.
So
excellent point.
So that I find that it, given the, it just gives me the opportunity to be able to do other types of evaluations and different traces that I can just keep up with the kids. It's a little bit more work for me, but I just find that they enjoy it a little bit more than just doing the traditional, C3. And yes, they do C2s writings and comprehensions, but I do find that has opened them up a little bit more.
Good. Okay. Excellent. Thank you for sharing, Vicky. Anybody else? No? Okay. So I'm going to continue sharing my screen here, just to confirm to you guys that you're all on the exact right path. And it makes me very happy to hear what you have said. The learning to be prioritized is considered nor as a minimum nor as a maximum of what you should be teaching. So absolutely right, you are correct. Use your progression of learning. We'll talk about gathering of evidence, the framework as well. Remember, the first report card was worth 35%. The second report card is worth 65%. And even though they mentioned that C1 is where we need to prioritize, all competencies will have to have been evaluated, which is why we keep talking about gathering of evidence. And I'm happy to hear that you guys are continuing to evaluate the other competencies, because at the end of all that, your professional judgment will be attached to whatever you've evaluated, so that we can make sure that the students are progressing. And it's the evaluation of that progression, in the same way as the young man who was creating a table. We want to know how far we can bring them between now and the end of the school year. So that's excellent. I'm just bringing you back here to, for those of you who are maybe less familiar with the program and the priorities and everything, on the website that I showed you earlier, the Centre de Service Scolaire website, there is a 25-minute video on planning that you can go take a look at. All of the documents are explained much more in detail, as well as the way to plan the lesson plan and so on and so forth. So that's there if you need it. Okay, so evaluation, I'm not going to spend too much time on this right now, but we know that we want to be collecting traces on the PowerPoint that you have access to, because I know that well, you know, Alexandra put it in the chat. Know that there's a website that gives you everything that you need to know with regards to triangulation. But when you hear that word, when we keep saying it, what we mean is that we're collecting evidence, but through different sources. So by sources of conversations, observations, and productions. And it has been proven by research that when you collect traces from more than one source, at the end of it, there's like a tendency that ends up showing up. You can see that even if a student is maybe not good in his writing skills, through a conversation, like I think it's Pascal who said it before, you can see that they still are progressing. So you can click on this link to that website where you'll get a lot of information. And there's also Les Trousses des Enseignants for the Centre de Service Scolaire, where you can get information as well. And remember that when we talk about evaluation, it's not just a question of evaluating for evaluating. It's a way as this at the same time to give feedback to our students as often as possible, and a way for us as teachers to regulate our teaching and to adjust to what we need. So here we mentioned too, did you know the evaluation of the progression of learning, it can be done in many, many ways. And again, through the examples we're going to give you today, we'll always show you an example and how we can use it in evaluation. Not all students need to be evaluated at once. So if you're walking around the classroom and you hear a conversation happening, you can jump on that opportunity to evaluate conversation in that 1 or 2 or 3 students. Show flexibility as well and differentiate based on the student's needs. If you ask them to write a letter to somebody, for example, well, we don't need to be as structured as saying everybody has to write to their grandmother. Somebody else could be writing to a friend. Somebody else can be writing to a pop star that they dream of speaking to. You might get a better reaction and a better product from the one that's writing to his pop star because he actually wants to be doing that. So sometimes we can differentiate in that way as well. Choose the right moment to evaluate and engage the students. Remember, and you all know this, I'm not teaching you this as well. I'm just bringing back things that you've heard in the past. If they get evaluated too much, sometimes they hear the word and they get overwhelmed. So too much is not more, and not enough is not good either. And every time that we evaluate, we ask ourselves, is this trace relevant? Can I differentiate a little bit for my students when I'm using the trace? And will the trace help me in my professional judgment? And everything that I have just said to you in this slide is just as much for choosing an evaluation situation as for choosing a tool that you're going to be using as a lesson or an activity. We should always be asking ourselves all of these questions when we do that, okay? And here I just wanted to take a second to remind you that we do have 2 programs, and some of you do teach Enriched. Well, why do we do Enriched, or who goes to Enriched? Well, it's for the students who can go beyond the core program. Normally, they will have completed a local intensive program or had other enriching experiences in ESL. And each competency will take students a little bit farther than the actual core program. So I'm going to stop for one moment here. How are we doing so far? Any questions or comments? Okay, so now we're going to go into the section where I will briefly explain the competency, And Alexandra is going to come in and give you for each competency a tool or tools. She has a lot of tricks up her sleeve. And then how you can use it and using it for evaluation. The other thing that I want you to know, which I find extraordinary in the specific tools that Alexandra chose for you, they can be used in distance learning, but they can also be used when you come back to the classroom as tools that are IT tools as well, as much for the students or as for yourselves in creating tools or different options that you have. So Alexandra did a very good job of choosing tools for you. So I'm just going to very quickly explain or remind you of C1, and we're going to start it right off the top. So C1, of course, we all know what it is, right? We're interacting orally. It's the cornerstone of the program. We're thinking about communication, but not only between the students, but to help them communicate in social context, eventually in the workplace. We know that they're going to need this for exploring the world, and so on and so forth. Our enriched students, well, we know that they already have the basic language that they need, but we bring them to expand this language and to go much further than where they are in the regular core program. When we look at evaluation, well, we're looking at the participation, the pertinence of the message that they're giving, the articulation of the message, but also the learning strategies, the uses of the resources, and when they get to level 2, we'll then be looking also at the management of the resources. So, when we're thinking about progression of learning, always come back to the official documents. You choose the objective for which you're going to be using the activity that we will be presenting you. You want to be collecting evidence, you want to be giving feedback to your students, and you always want to come back to your professional judgment. Take notes, take notes, take notes, take notes. That's what's going to help you. So I'm going to stop my sharing. And I'm going to let Alexandra take control. If you want to, do you need me to? You can take it automatically.
Okay.
Go ahead, darling.
Let me just do this. No, not this one. There's so many options in Teams. Now, do you guys see this screen with suggested tools? I'm at the right page. We're all good? All right. So for C1, basically we need to see them interacting and with more than one person. So obviously using breakout rooms is what's going to help, like putting them into a room. We have a section on la trousse numérique. I just hope I did it correctly. Are you in the trousse numérique with me right now? Still on the same page? We have a whole bunch of tutorials that you can watch, because I want to make it clear today that I cannot go into technical details, and if I spend time showing you how do you create an account and how do you assign your students, then we'd be here all day. But there are tutorials to teach you all of these things. There are lots of little tricks and tools that you can use to basically create workrooms where you can send students and you can listen in. You can even record, just make sure you have permission to do so, but you can even record. And I've had ESL teachers tell me, even when we go back to the new normal, or the normal that's about to come up, I hope, they're still going to use breakout rooms every once in a while, maybe putting kids in the hall, recording with a device so they can just listen again. Because too often we walk around in the class. I haven't taught ESL for 2 years, but I still think it's going on this way. You walk around in the class and you try to listen, but then you have all that noise, or you bring them outside while the rest of the class is doing something else, but then you have to manage what's going on inside the class and outside. So think of breakout rooms, not just for distance learning, but maybe for later on. You can still use Google Meet and have your team in the hall record themselves and watch the recording later. One thing to know is that students cannot start breakout rooms with their CS Laval account by themselves. So you'll need to create the room, and students are not allowed to record either. So they won't be able to start the recording. So you'll need to jump in the room, see that everybody is there, start the recording, and if you leave, they're still in there and it's still recording. So you're okay and you can jump back in. So with little ones, we might not want to let them all by themselves. You know your groups, you know what's going on. If you think they can be let by themselves in a breakout room, go ahead. If you think you can't, then maybe it's time for asynchronous work for the rest of your students, and you spend time with that one group and you evaluate them live watching them. And you can still record and come back to it later.
Alexandra, you have a question from Vicky?
Yes, Vicky.
Hi, quick question. Sorry, Alexandra.
Yep.
Sorry about that.
Go
I didn't want
ahead.
to. I just wanted to ask. I totally. A lot of these new. All of the available resources that we have. I understand that we work for a French school board. I mean, my French is good enough where I do listen to the different recordings and there's no problem. But I do find it much easier to listen to them in English and apply the stuff in English.
Well, we're pretty lucky because all of these tools have tons of tutorials in English. Like most of the time, I'll be watching the tutorial in English and I'm making it in French for all the French teachers.
Okay, but
so if you're looking for good tutorials, I could send a list of other people who create these tutorials in English. I have a few in mind that create like exactly the same thing, because usually I get my inspiration from them and then make it in French because these tools are originally in English anyway.
Which is no, I have no. The only thing I'm saying is it possible? I mean, I've done it. I've done the legwork. I would appreciate it a lot. But what I'm saying is there a possibility to add like a link below the tutorials to say, to be watched if you want to watch it in English. So this way we don't have to do those extra steps.
Sure, I could look into it. I just started at CS Laval in December, but since that's a good suggestion. So every time I have like an equivalent in English, I did add a few things on that trousse numérique. There's like, if you look like underneath some of the stuff, it says you want to see it in English, like click here. So I'm starting to do that more and more since I can. But yeah, I'll take it into consideration and try to find you an equivalent every time I can.
Yeah, at least just a link. It doesn't have to be 50-50. Just a link. So this way, because a lot of it, a lot of the things that they asked us, I went and I watched them, but I'm more comfortable and it's just easier for me to wrap my mind around it versus in French. I'll be very honest. So that was my only comment. Thank you.
I'll keep it in mind and I'll add it to the trousse numérique every time I can. I know I created a Jamboard section and I translated it from something originally in English, but I left the link and I said, if you're an ESL teacher, click here, go see it in English, because it was already done. So it wasn't done by me, but I got permission to translate it. So I'll try to do that for some of the videos that like every time I have one in mind.
Thank you.
The other thing I want to show you is how to use evaluation grids in Google Classroom. Now, to evaluate C1, we often walk around or we listen. It's nice to have a grid, but usually we use paper and pen, and then we circle things and put notes and whatever. But did you know that you can create in Google Classroom, you could create an assignment. So I'm going to call it my C1 evaluation number 1. And if I give it a name, something here actually appears called grille d'évaluation. And you can create your own grid, but you don't have to, because I created all the C1 grids for you to import into Google Classroom. And I will give access to the file to Carolyn, who will put it on her ESL website. So you can actually save those grids. And instead of create a grid, you'll be able to import from Sheet and import the actual C1 grid. And it's done for ESL and Esl for every level. So at least for C1, you won't have to actually type everything up. For C2 and C3, I couldn't do the same thing because C2 and C3 is adapted to whatever task that you want to. So you'll have to create it from scratch. You'll need to click and say, here's the first criteria. This is worth 5 points, or A, B, C, D. That's up to you. And you'll actually have to build your grid. I know it's a lot of work to start with, but you can always reuse your grids after and modify just the information. So once they're done, that's pretty neat and pretty helpful. Now, once you have your grid and your assignment, students don't actually have to do anything and submit anything. You can actually just walk around, open the name of the student, and click on the name of the student, and you'll see the grid open up. If you have access to a phone or a tablet, you'll be able to just click and say it's a 5 on participation, but it's a 3 on content of the message, and you'll be able to just click, and it will automatically calculate and grade for the student, and they'll receive their grade after. On top of it, you have a section once you submit the homework. I'll submit it. It's a pretty boring homework, but I'll submit it. And once I open it up and I have my students, actually I don't have students in here, but you'll have a section where you'll be able to comment. So you'll be able to add comments to the student and type it up. You can do that on the phone, you can do that on a tablet, you can do that on the computer as well. So you'll have the grid, click, click, click. It automatically calculates on 20, and then you can add your comments. If you want to add audio comments to the student and actually talk to them, that's also possible by adding a link. So by using the evaluation grid plus classroom for C1, it's a neat way to organize it. If you're not using Google Classroom, you could still use something like this that was done by my colleague Melissa, who teaches French, so that's why it's in French, and she removed the name of the students, but these are actual notes that she took on her students. She basically divided a Google Sheet into Team 1, Team 2, Team 3, Team 4, and so forth. These would be the names of the different students, and she took notes every time she observed something for every discussion. We talked about traces and judgment call at the end of it. Well, these could all be traces, and in the end, you actually pass judgment after a few evaluation and a few observations. So that would be another way. If you want a template of this, I could totally make one and make it available as a template in Google Sheet if you prefer, but the grids are already done and they'll be on the slide. So for C1, the last thing I'm going to suggest is on la trousse. It is in French. This one I won't translate in English. I'm sorry, Vicky, because it's a 3-hour or a 1.5-hour presentation. But we do have a presentation that was done on how to evaluate, like with distance learning, and they do provide other tools. Even though they're for everybody, there are tools that could totally work for English as well. So for C1, that's it. I have loads more for C2 and C3 coming up.
Thank you. Thank you, Alexandra. Two things that I wanted to mention. The last tool that Alexandra just showed you with regards to evaluating in distance learning, if you go to the new website that we have created, there is information on that in English as well. And I have on that website also several videos on flexibility, differentiation, and so on and so forth, that are all either ministry approved or that we have created, and they're all in English. I am going to be putting and adding a lot of stuff in English there for you guys, okay? So don't hesitate to come back and to look at those. And the other thing that I wanted to actually ask or mention, I didn't ask the question at the beginning, and after this, we're going to take a little health break, as we call them. But I wanted to know, what are your levels of, we're kind of just taking for granted that because you're teaching high school, everybody is at least comfortable in computer skills. But is there anybody here who is not comfortable at all, or who just with what Alexandra just showed, you get nervous and you're having hot sweats? Because that's important for us to know, because we can adapt, or we can make sure that we maybe do something or send you like a couple of links afterwards to help you out. If I ask you quickly, maybe you can just, everybody sees the chat, maybe just go right in the chat, I'm comfortable, I'm uncomfortable, one or the other, just so to give us an idea. Can I ask you to do that? Okay, just go ahead and dump them in there into the chat.
And when you're doing that, I just want to tell you at the end of the presentation, you'll have like our email. If my name is pretty easy to find, I don't think there's another Alexandra Kootley in the school board, so I think you'll find me easily. Don't hesitate to send me an email, say I want to try this out. I can totally make you a tutorial and send it to you and in English, and I can send it to you. I can record my screen and show you how something is done. So don't hesitate. I'd love to help you out with that.
Okay, good. So I will invite you all to take 2 seconds and to please write in the chat whether you're comfortable or not. Again, this is when we record like this, what's in the chat doesn't get recorded, so it's just between you and us. But if you could do that, that would be great. Thank you. I see them popping in. And what we're going to do, is everybody okay with a 5-minute, just a quick bathroom break? Hello, Rosa.
Hi, Rosa. How are you?
Hi. Alexandra, I have to tell you, I want to just thank you ever so much.
Why?
You know, ever since I came across you and having you as a CT, it has pushed me forward to grow on that level.
Oh.
And I mean, I'm always searching for new things, doing my work, my research, and experimenting with stuff. And every time I do so, you know, I have you in my thoughts. I thank you so much.
So nice.
It was so much fun. It was not supervision. It was fun.
Well, I tell you, I've grown immensely, you know, all due to you. You really inspired me.
You look very happy. Are you happy where you are and with your students and everything?
I mean, I'm happy anywhere, you know. I mean, I just love what I do. And, you know, with each place and each class and each whatever, I mean, it's just a new challenge that I just keep looking forward to.
Love to hear that. Sure. That's the attitude we want.
Isn't it, eh?
Yeah, for sure.
Wow. So I think that everybody is slowly coming back. Okay. I just wanted to touch base with you guys and to check, because I gave you a little bit of information with regards this morning to the programs of study, as well as the progression of learning and the framework. Are you all pretty comfortable with those tools? You can just nod your head, or is there a little bit more that we need to be planning at some point? Just, yes, we're doing good, generally speaking. Okay, Dabia?
Yeah, I find it a little hard, like to like each time, like refer to the same lesson, for example, to teach it online and in the classroom. I'm doing everything for the first time.
Yes.
So yeah, so sometimes just we can, like, there are some evaluation situations that can't be shared with students. So we only have to do them like when they're in the classroom. And online, you have to look for a new thing, another thing, like to just really can't find like how to make them match like together.
I would invite you, Dabia. I know that Alexandra is going to be sharing some examples and things like that a bit later. But on the ESL website that we've created, you do have links on there to Récit des langues and to another website where there are LES activities that are especially for online learning. So those could maybe be things you want to be looking at to help you out with those elements. Okay.
So do we have to stick to the workbook, for example, and finish all 80% of it, or?
Nope. You are the professional. You decide that what the elements of learning that you want to be covering between now and the end of the school year. You can pick and choose from your workbook and make sure that you cover the priorities. And then you can, from there, you can branch out to continue and to bring them as far as you can. I do invite you to go see the video that I created on planning. It will help you with that. Okay, Dabia?
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Okay. So if you don't mind, ladies and gentlemen, we will continue with competency number 2. Are we good? I see it. Oh, somebody's. Yes, I
Hi,
hear it.
Dottie.
We need to be adjusting to the new reality. Absolutely. And I totally agree with you. It's Natalia. Yeah, I agree. Okay, so let's continue. Here we go. So when we talk about competency number 2, of course, and some of you mentioned this a little bit earlier, we're talking about reinvesting understanding of text. So it's not just reading the text, but it's showing that we understand it. We're using various different sources of information. We want them to, in the second cycle, they're listening, reading, viewing text. They're exploring more ideas and issues that have to do with oops. Okay, I thought it was a fire alarm that someone was having. So we're building on that investment and the reinvestment of their learning and their reading. And also, as we go into EESL, because they have a better comprehension of English already, well, then we're bringing them to go even further and we enlarge the types of text that they're working with, and with more complex response tasks when we're in EESL. So of course, what is evaluated? We're evaluating the comprehension of the text, the knowledge from text to the appropriate tasks, their communication and their learning strategies, and again, the use of resources. And in EESL, well, we'll add to that the application of personalized response processes. And what I would like to say with regards to C2 is this is one of those places where it's very interesting to be speaking with your colleagues who teach, example, French, or who teach history, or other cultures and things like that, because it's a great opportunity to choose texts that the student will be able to apply in their other courses, or that you're taking the same type of information that's being covered in other courses to bring it in English. So there's already a reality that the students have understood. So I do invite you to do that. I will, when we look at progression of learning, always the same thing. Before you decide what learning activity you want to do with the students, or before you decide what evaluation situations you want to be doing, take a look at your documents, your program of study, your progression of learning, the framework. Choose objectives between now and the end of the school year. Make sure that every objective that you choose, you're also thinking about collecting evidence to be able to collect traces and give feedback to the students as much as you can, and use your professional judgment to assess what has been taught and what has been learned. Sometimes we have teachers who teach one thing, and then when comes time to assess, they're assessing something that they have not even taught yet. So you need to make sure that everything is imbricked together and that you're thinking of an objective, you're using the activities that go with that objective, you're evaluating to go with that objective, and then you're giving feedback to the students. Think about the table with the chair, with the legs of the chairs. You're bringing them to be able to eventually maybe make a leg of a chair that's not 100%, but you're showing them how to get to be better and better at that chair leg making. Okay. Alexandra, I will give the control to you.
Perfect. All right. So I'm going to show you different resources. I've split them up on this page because these are the resources. They're not for evaluation. And I'm going to suggest one way to evaluate C2 differently. But these 3 sites I'm going to show you are basically the base, where you're going to find your texts. So the first one I'm going to show you, I've been using it for years, is called readtheory.org. It is free, so we love that. Basically, the way it works, students take a diagnostic test. If you're going to do it in class or they're going to do it at home, allow for at least a good 30 minutes for them to take the test. what they'll see is a bunch of different extracts from text, so paragraphs and different texts, and multiple choice questions. The text will be at varying levels. So of course, some of the questions are going to be super difficult for students. So you have to warn them in advance and tell them it's normal. If some of the questions you have no idea, you don't even understand the different level. This is the diagnostic test, so try your best. And then it will actually place students at a grade level. Of course, this is an American site, so it's going to place them at a grade level in the US. For example, my Sec 3 students in Saint-Jérôme, who have very limited access to English for the majority of them, were usually grade 3 students. So I told them in advance, so they wouldn't say, what do you mean, I'm that bad? I'm grade 3, and they would feel bad. So I would tell them in advance, those are the levels. Imagine it means that you went to school in English all of your life. It will also identify, which is interesting, their Lexily level, not just their grade level. So I used to use that to suggest books, because there are websites you can go to that will classify different books. For example, the latest Harry Potter will be this level of Lexily, and you can basically suggest books at their level or challenge them to just the other level. I won't go through all of this. I'll show you the site. It's more interesting. Just so you know, there are no tutorials on La Trousse Numérique on this, but Read Theory has a YouTube channel. So if you look it up, and they have tutorials in English, because it's only available in English. Your French colleagues are going to be jealous, but it doesn't exist in English, a site like this. And you'll be able to watch tutorials to show you how to use and how to sign up your students. Once you're logged in as a teacher, you'll have access to your classes, to their progress reports, and see where your students are at. The beauty of this site is that it adapts to the students. The more they do text, the more they read text and answer questions, the more it adapts. So a student can start at a grade 3, but after reading 20 texts, for example, they'll be at a grade 4. And your strong student in the class that's at grade 10, it will actually adapt to him too. So this is more for practice, but just know that on Read Theory, you can also go down to, it's the Teacher's Lounge. And then if you go down, you'll have access to all the different texts. You'll have access to their YouTube channel. Just know that it exists, and it's a good assignment. I had parents all the time telling me, what can they do to improve in their English? I sent them to Read Theory because they could do it on their own. It adapts, and you can track your student. And it actually has a little bit of a motivation thing because it gives them badges when they go up a level and everything. So it's encouraging, and it's all free. I would say it works from secondary 1 to secondary 5. It would be a little difficult for primary students. The grade 1 texts are very, very easy. They look more like poems than actual texts, and then it goes up from there. Know also that these are informational texts. So it's really reading comprehension, basic, like what was the main idea? Why did the student get upset in the text? They're that type of questions. The second one I want to show you is called Common Lit. I don't know if you know of that one, but that one's also free. So it's commonlit.org. Pascal has a question.
My question is, can we create an account for all the students and see their evolution?
Yes. And you can track how many quizzes they took. You can track what level they're at. So I used to do that at the beginning of the year, but it's never too late to use it. And then it gave me a good portrait of my class, and I would know who is struggling in terms of reading comprehension. And it helped me for later on to help them in evaluations and everything. So yes, you can track your students.
Is it possible to write feedback on the account, or it has to be?
No. This one is automatic, and you don't write anything. It's really you follow whatever they've been doing. So you know that Pascal has not been on the site for 3 weeks and hasn't read any text, but I don't know, Rosa has been on the site every single day and has read 25 texts. So you can give feedback verbally when you see the students and say, Pascal, what's going on? Like you didn't go on the website, but you cannot write to them on the site.
Okay, thanks.
They can create their account on their own as well if they wanted to. So if they have a little brother at home that wants to try it out, they could totally do it as well. So, but if as a teacher, you create your class, that's the beauty of it. You can actually follow your students. This next one has a little bit more. Common Lit does the same thing. It's free. There's no diagnostic test at the beginning, though. You as a teacher will assign the different texts. It has information text, but it also has poetry and short story. You can find, let's say you're doing a unit on sports. Well, you can actually look up a different category of text on sports. It has current events. It has like a bigger variety than Read Theory. And the difference is Read Theory, you don't assign the text. The machine does it for the students. They don't get to choose. They practice a variety of texts. With Common Lit, you can create your groups and assign it, and it even talks to Google Classroom. So you can import your Google Classroom already created, and it talks to Classroom, and it assigns it as a homework. So you could say, I want this text on Eleanor Roosevelt. I want all my students to actually read it. It also has the possibility of adjusting the different text at different lexically level. And if you look, this is what it looks like for the student. The student inside the tool can make the font bigger. They can actually use the annotation tools because there's a highlighter and they can highlight. And there are different questions, and you can choose if you want just multiple choice questions where it's autocorrect, or if you want open-ended questions, and then you correct the questions in your group and you have to correct what they wrote. So this one has more possibility for you to give them feedback. It even has discussion questions. So as a C1, you could totally have your students read at different levels. So we could be the four of us and read the text at different levels of lexically. So the vocabulary is simpler. I don't evaluate the comprehension. I evaluate the discussion that comes after, but we all read the same text and we can still talk about it. So pretty neat site. By the way, Read Theory and Common Lit has a function where you can download as PDF if you want. So you're not in the platform and you just assign and you control what they see. It can be printed as well. The last one I'm going to show you.
Alexandra, yes. We have a question before you
Yes,
continue
absolutely.
From Vicky.
Yeah, I just have a question. You said that we can actually import our addresses, right?
You can link to Google Classroom. So
okay.
When you're in your account, I won't go through all the different things, but you create your account with your CS Laval. Make sure to do that so that it talks to your Google Classroom. And then if you look at my different classes, see how it has the little Google Classroom logo? It's because I imported my class and I synced it to Google Classroom. So I don't have to manually invite all my students and enter their email and everything. It did it automatically. With Read Theory, it doesn't do that. You'll have to create the accounts for your students and then give them a password and everything. You'll need to do a bit of legwork on that one.
Okay, the reason why I was asking is because I know that we cannot import our students' email addresses because it's a Microsoft address that they have and not a Gmail account.
No, it works with Google Classroom. I imported it and I have students in that class and it works.
And the students they don't have a Gmail account?
No, and it works with the CS Laval. They have a Google account with CS Laval. They have a Microsoft and a Google account.
Mine only have a Microsoft account. They don't have a Google account.
Okay, well, we can talk maybe and I can see what how that will work. If not, you can still do it. It just won't connect to Google Classroom. You'll need to create a class and import with their email and do the manual work. You can import from a list, so from like an Excel sheet or something like that where you copy paste. So that's doable too.
Okay, perfect.
Just fun when it talks to Google Classroom because then you can post automatically and import, but it's doable manually as well.
Thank you.
No problem.
We also had a question from Larissa, but I believe you answered it. It was, do the students have to create accounts on Common Lit, or I just import them to?
The teacher can create it for them. Same thing with read theory. You have different options. I won't go through all the options, but there are some for little ones with just a code that they enter and they join in. There's some like invitation by email. And then this one has import from Google Classroom as well. So you have different ways of creating an account. And by the way, Common Lit also has a YouTube channel with all the tutorials. How do I create my group? How do I assign a text? They're all there. So, and it's all in English because it's the tool's not available in French anyway. If you have colleagues or yourself who teach Spanish, Common Lit is also in Spanish. So there's not a lot of resources out there, but for Spanish teachers, but they can do the same thing with Spanish texts. The last one is called Newsella, and this one has less possibilities than the other two that I showed you, and that's why I'm showing it last, because it has a paid version. So to have the reports on your students, to be able to track if they read the text and everything, you'll need the paid version for all the progress report. But you can still use their content, and you can still browse, and they have lots of amazing articles, and you can still take an article and actually adapt the level. See how it was at 810 of Lexily? I can make it simpler, and I've just simplified the text. And I can still share this as a link for my students elsewhere, email, classroom, whatever. It's just I won't be able to track if they've actually answered the questions and everything, but it's still a great resource to assign texts. And when they actually visit the text, as you can see, there's a read aloud. They can even listen without the word cue and everything else. They can actually listen to the text being read. If you if you add it to a text set, you can actually send a bunch of texts. So it has less possibilities in terms of classroom management than the other two I showed you, but it can still be printed, saved, sent as a link, sent as a PDF for them to read. So it might be a great tool to send to have a discussion after. You'd have to manually decide that you're sending the text at which Lexily, but you could actually decide my strong students are going to read it at 1,220. My weaker students are going to read it at 580. We can't hear you? No? Okay, let me try. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, I just closed and opened my mic. Technology, just turn off and turn on.
We lost the last 2 minutes of what you were saying.
You could basically adapt and print or share different levels of text. So if I have very strong students in my class, we all want to talk about this hiker in our class discussion. I could send the strongest students the highest Lexily and my weakest students the lowest Lexily. The text information is the same, but the vocabulary changed. The length of the text is not as long, and you can still send it and have different levels. The last thing I'm going to show you is how you could evaluate the C2, and I was very happy to hear people talk about you could do it orally to evaluate C2, because that's one way I used to do it with Flipgrid. Now, of course, you could ask your students to take their mobile phone and record themselves and send you the video, and that totally works. What's great with Flipgrid is once you have your teacher account, students submit their video and they're all in one place. And then because they're all in one place, it's easier for you to correct. There are grids you can add to evaluate, and you can comment directly on the platform. A lot easier than going back and forth with videos, and they can record directly in the platform. The way it works is you create a topic. And by the way, Flipgrid is only in English, even though a lot of French teachers use it too. So a lot of videos are out there on how to use Flipgrid. You'll find lots and lots of tutorials. You basically create what they call a topic. It's basically the question you're going to ask your students. So let's say we read this text about the hiker, and I want to know, would you ever go on a hike with Emily Ford? And why would you choose her as your companion to go on a hike? And that's my C2 question, where I want to see if they read the text. I could add my question, add information, and of course, there's a whole lot. You can add a video, a text, a link. You can add all sorts of stuff. And then basically you decide how long you want to give the students to answer. Well, they have only 5 minutes. It can go up to 10 minutes. That's the maximum they can record. After that, it stops and have to stop talking. And then you can also activate this, which my high school students liked a lot. It's called video moderation. The video is not public until you make it public, and I never made it public. So the video was between me and my students, but you could have the students watch other students' videos and comment if you wanted to. So before
Just
you
connect it to Google Classroom?
No, it does link to Google Classroom. You can send the link to Classroom as a homework and say your homework is to.
Sorry, you're chopping on me when you're talking.
Yes, it does talk to Google Classroom, talks to Microsoft Teams as well. So you can send links to all of these platforms. It talks to a bunch of platforms actually.
All right.
The other section that's interesting, especially for us ESL teachers, is the discovery section. Now, French teachers who use the platform have about 1% of this that's in French and 99% is in English. They are lessons already made with text to read or videos to watch that you can assign in just one click to your students. And you can, of course, modify the question or remove a text. The first section here called Partners is made by companies. And you might recognize like a few of them. Esl Library is a really cool one and has a lot of different questions. So let's say I click on this one. Here's a topic about Kamala Harris. And you have the quote that they have to read. The information is already done. And if I want to send it to my students, I just click add topic and send it to my students. And the lesson is all done. I'll be able to modify it, simplify it, do whatever I want. Or I could save to my collection and use it later. So if you have free time, I know we don't have free time, but you can explore and you can maybe save a few things and say, oh, I have this unit coming up and here's this text already done. The activity is done. Sometimes you'll see websites attached, Google Docs, presentations, it's all there. So that's a neat thing to check out in Flipgrid is the discovery for ready-made lesson or inspiration. The partners are made by companies, and if you go down, these are made by teachers. So some teachers have already made different little units in Flipgrid, and you can reuse them. So that's something to check out. That's something usually I don't show because there's nothing in French. So I show how to create the discussion, and you have to create everything. But because we teach ESL, we have access to all these resources in English. So worth checking out.
What an excellent tool, Alexandra. We have a question from Vicky.
Oh my God, Alexandra, where have you been? It is excellent. Now, here's my first question. What I've been using with the students, actually, I'm so happy because it just actually confirms that I'm on the right track. I've been using this website. It's called SpeakPipe.
Yeah.
So you can type it in. It's there's a free version of it, and it actually lets the students record their orals.
Yep.
For about a minute and a half max. So many of my students, what they do is that they'll record, they haven't finished, they'll re-record something else, and then, you know, they just go on that way, which is fine.
I forgot to mention that Flipgrid, I know I said it's a video, but there's also an audio portion. So if you have students shy, they could actually switch when they submit their video, they can switch, take the camera off, they can put an image, they can modify the image and everything. And it kind of creates this podcast type answer. Okay. So you could assign an audio answer up to 10 minutes.
Oh my God, where have you been all my life? Because it's perfect because but the thing is, here's my, okay, sorry, because I was following, but I got so excited that I think I missed a little section. So when I create this, when the student, let's say, submits it, and I link it to my Google Classroom, will it give me a notification that the student has submitted it?
That will be up to you in your settings. You'll be able to say, like, I don't want notifications, or I want to receive an email every time a student submits something. that will be up to you. So when I first started with Flipgrid, I activated the email. So yes, with like 8 groups or 7 groups, it's a lot of
Yeah.
emails, but I wanted to be sure to not miss anything. You might get fed up at some point of the emails and turn it off, but then you just visit Flipgrid and you can keep track. It will tell you 3 of you students have answered, and it will tell you that Carolyn still hasn't answered, and you'll have all the information you can track.
Okay, and can I create, let's say, groups? Because right now, when I receive them,
Yeah,
I receive all the recordings, but
they're all mixed.
but it's okay that they're mixed because I've actually sort of asked the students to do something for me. So that's why I can identify them by color, by group. So
Well,
I have
I
a
showed
folder.
you how to create a topic, but you can create your groups. So that's what I used to do. I used to have 6 different groups, group 1, group 2, group 3, and then all the same students were in the same group. And you can copy the same topic to every group, so you don't have to redo it every time. So you create your question and you say, assign it to my 6 groups. And it even talks to Google Classroom, say, send it to Classroom as a homework. And then students have that homework to do.
Oh my God, it's fantastic. Thank you so
They
much.
need to download an app on their phone. I don't think they'll have much issue with that. I think they know how to download apps on their phones.
Okay.
The only issue I've had is with the older students telling me, yeah, but I don't have any space for that app because I have TikTok and everything else. So I say, well, delete TikTok. And
Okay. Can they if they're using a laptop, because technically I asked them to use their laptops and
works
not
anywhere. It works online. So it works on the app
Perfect.
with your mobile, and on the computer, it works online.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
So Chromebooks, it works everywhere. I used this in class 6 years ago, and it only got better. Like it's been there for a while. So the discovery section didn't exist when I used it. So I had to create all my activity. There's a thing called mixtapes that's interesting too, where you can actually take some of the videos from your students. If you don't know what a mixtape is, I feel very old, but basically it takes the videos from your students and you create a mixtape of all your favorite videos. So you could showcase like who had like the most interesting answer, or you could create a mixtape for one student to show them their progress throughout the year and say, look, this was your first video and this is today. Listen to you speaking and how you improved. And it's very easy. It's a drag and drop thing. So, and it creates that mixtape. You can share it with parents if you wanted to, with permission from the student, of course, but it's an amazing tool to discover. And there are loads of tutorials out there to help you with the tool.
Perfect. If ever you decided to do a workshop, not long over this, I would be signing up. FYI, just let me know.
Perfect.
And Pascal obviously is excited about this tool too and has a question as well.
Yeah, regarding the tools that you just showed up, I mean, all of them seems interesting, Common Lit and this one, Flipgrid. Is it possible, because they all have what you call simplify the text, this part that you can do, when you send it to classroom, let's say, special ed, so I have students in the different group that are at different level. Is it possible to send it to a certain group in the group, or? Yes.
Once you click submit to classroom, you'll be able to select and unselect student and say, this one, I want to send it to, student 1, 2, 3, 4. And the next one, you'll have to redo it. You'll have to submit a few times, but yes, you can select students.
Okay, so it's not the whole group. You can.
Exactly. You can select different students if you wanted to. You could send it. I used to do that and send it to just one student and say, you're finished. Here you go. I just sent you something to read. I think you're going to find it interesting. And it's totally doable.
What a great way, Pascal. I'm thinking of Isham as well. When you have groups that have multi-levels in the same group, and you don't want to be giving a grade 2 activity to somebody who's in Sec 2, you can give them a Sec 2 activity, but with a level of vocabulary that is much simpler. This is exactly what we're talking about when we say differentiation. So excellent point, Pascal.
Not having Esl at my school and having like perfectly bilingual students sitting in my class with the yes/no toaster students sitting right next to him. And then you have to teach. Well, technology helped me a lot because I used to have like Chromebooks for my students, and I used to be able to send out a text and say, you have 20 minutes to go and explore the text and do the questions and everything. And then we're having a discussion after on the text, but everybody could do it at a different level. So I was still able to do C1 and even evaluate C2 and see if they could reinvest what they actually just read about and not have anybody feel left out or not challenged.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. I really like those tools, and I totally agree. If you want to do workshop
class as well.
Yeah.
We have another question from Vicky.
Yeah, sorry about this. For the Flipgrid, do I have to open up a teacher's account, or
Yes.
it's just I do, right?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
And then you'll play around with it. You'll be able to create your groups, create topics, and everything.
Thank you.
And
No
remember
problem.
that if ever you try to do something out of all these beautiful tools that Alexandra is sharing with you, and you're not able to, or you need a bit of extra help, I would first suggest you to check to see if a tutorial exists on what it is you're trying to do. And if you don't find anything, I'm sure Alexandra will be more than thrilled to share her expertise with you as well.
The tutorials I'm going to share in the chat are in French, but if you want tutorials in English, I had to translate them because they didn't exist in French. So don't hesitate if you have questions. I can find tutorials. I know there are online courses. Flipgrid is owned by Microsoft, and they have like a full training center on Flipgrid, like on how to start and everything. So it's lesson 1, how do I create my account? Lesson 2, how do I invite my students? So and it's all in English, of course.
And the more we're talking and the more I see how excited you all are with regards to these tools, I promise you that we'll go put a page or a part on our website where everything that she has given to us here, we'll put the link directly to that tool, and then we'll try to find the tutorials that are basic tutorials or something like that. I promise you guys we'll do something like that on the website directly, so it's a one-stop shop, right? One-stop shop? Yeah, I think I flipped them there. Vicky, do you have a different question?
No, actually, I just, because it was more my curiosity that got the best of me, I tried to create a free account through Microsoft. And it's telling me that I need my administrator to grant me access. So have we been getting blocked because they've changed their security measures a lot? So
I don't know. So we'll check, but
okay.
You can create an account without your Microsoft account. This is more of a technical issue. So maybe you can write to me after and I'll speak to the techs and see what's going on. I created my account, my Google account, even though it's a Microsoft tool, and it worked, but I'll see what's going on. I know Microsoft had a big crash this week, and that might have affected things. So we'll see.
All right.
They weren't working for a couple of hours. So the world stopped turning for a minute.
Everybody good?
What is the limit of the video on Flipgrid?
There's none.
So I can record for 4 or 5 minutes?
10 minutes is your maximum recording time. The teacher decides. So you assign the recording time if you want to give them 10, but it's 10 minutes maximum.
Yeah, no, that's way too much, 10 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's enough.
All
When
right.
they started out, it was 5 minutes and it was enough. And then they upped it to 10 minutes. But I think for ESL, plenty. If they talk for 10 minutes, I'm impressed.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Excellent. So thank you, Alexandra, and thank you, everybody. It's very nice to see you all interacting like this and sharing. It's very interesting. So we will look at the C3. And of course, we know that C3, we're talking about writing and producing text. It is something that is often very scary for the students. So we try to get to it by different ways. We want them to become familiar with the writing process, to experiment, to dare, to try. Of course, we're looking at broadening the types of text that they write about, and eventually maybe working in teams, in groups, and so on and so forth. Again, we're thinking about the process when we're doing C3. So we're thinking about pertinence of text, formulation of text, the communication and learning strategies that the students are using in their text. And then as they go on, we're looking more and more at how they manage their resources, their learning strategies, and so on and so forth. So it englobes all and everything that has to do with writing. But again, what better than having an activity that reunites all three competencies, and then you'll get a little bit of writing and you'll be getting evidence of learning and collecting traces, so that when you end at the end of the school year, we're not in panic mode and looking for ways to collect information. So this is the same slide I bring back every time to remind you, stop and think before we do an activity. We want to go get the right ones. And what I really, really like about everything that Alexandra has presented to you is the fact that we are not having to invent material. There's so much stuff that's already there. And although we know how teachers are passionate, if we can make you not have to create your own stuff, that to me is a win-win situation. So again, collecting evidence, giving feedback, and especially in the writing process, even if they can't make a sentence at the beginning of the school year, that doesn't mean that when they get to the end of the school year, they're not able to make a nice paragraph. And that's where you will provide your professional judgment when you get to the end. So again, I'm turning it over to you, Alexandra.
All right, so let me share my screen again. Now, C3 is the difficult one, distance, because how do you know who actually wrote the text? And they have access to all of the technology and Google Translate and everything. So I know it's the tough one. So I'm going to show you a few little tips and tricks. It's not 100% foolproof that they didn't cheat or they didn't ask for help, but it will give you some info on the text. The first is to use the revision history of the document. I'm in a Google Doc that I worked on with other people, and there are two things I can take a look at. If you look at the top here, I know it's small, but right next to Partager, I have this little up arrow that you see. If I open this up, it opens up Tableau de bord d'activité. It tells me who has read and accessed the text. Now, it gives you an indication if they shared the text with somebody else or if another student was in their text and when, because I can see that my friend Melissa was in this text on February 6th. It's not fail-proof because they know how to turn things off so that we don't catch them, but it gives you an idea. It also gives you information on when they actually access their text. So mommy calls me and says, but Tristan's been working on his text like nonstop the past 3 days, but he hasn't been in the text for the past 3 days and hasn't even accessed the document. Well, you have the information right there. You can screenshot it and basically look at it. So basically, you can check out if they shared the document, who has read the document, and when they actually access the document. Another way is to go in Fichier, Historique de révision. Voir l'historique de révision. Now, on the side here, I have everything that was actually done in the text from the day it was created. So here's what it looked like when I created it. And then a few minutes later, I added a paragraph. And then a few minutes later, something else was added. And you can keep going this way. The different colors that are there, if you see my name is there and it's kind of a turquoise color. If somebody else wrote in the document, in this case, my friend Maryse wrote in the document, it actually highlights which section she actually did when we go in the document. Now it's highlighted in purple. So I know that they collaborated. So if you give group work, for example, you'll be able to know who did what. Another neat trick is if you give an assignment to students, there's no way to block the document from them to actually work on it. Let's say we started in class and then they go home, but you don't want them to touch it. You could ask them to click on the 3 little dots and name this version. So they could name it, copy whatever, like the date or time or whatever. And you'll actually know when you go in the history of like the historique de révision, if they actually touched it after, because automatically the other versions are going to be named February 12, 350, and you'll have the date and time. Then it's classroom management to talk to your students and say, listen, you went in the document all night, you worked in it, you shared it with Rosa, and Rosa did all this work, and then you can actually manage. So that's like a neat little trick that's available in Google Doc, but also in Google Slides. So if you have a presentation and they work in group or something, that's also available. So fichier, historique de révision, and you can actually voir, or you can name today's version. So you could tell all the students, right now, I want you to name this one draft, and this one is your draft, or copy one, or whatever, and then you'll be able to track. Now, another neat little trick is to use an extension called Draftback. You'll need to visit the Chrome web store to install it on Chrome, and I'll show you what it does. Basically, once it's installed, inside a Google Doc, and it only works for Google Doc, you'll see this appear, Draftback 2,298 revisions. It means I actually did all these revisions in my text. If I click on it, it will actually load all that historique de révision that I just showed you. It will load it to actually show it to you as a movie, kind of. And that actually catches the cut and pastes. It actually, because you'll see it real quickly, like this wasn't there before, and boom, I have a full paragraph. Or it will even catch the Google Translate, because for a brief second, it will say copied from Google Translate. What I used to do with this is I used to be able to see, it takes a bit of time to load if there's a lot of revision. If it's 150 words, it will take you 2 seconds, not as long as it's taking right now. But I could sit with the student and actually look at the movie of his writing process. So amazing for remedial, or even you can record your screen and look at it with the student and say, see, here's how you wrote. So this is everything from the beginning of my text. You guys can see when it's crossed out, when it's cut and paste. It's actually playing fast right now, but I could play it at actual speed, so I can actually watch my student work after they've done the work. So I'm not watching them live right now, but it will actually show every single thing that they did, every correction that they did. Now, if I play it faster, you'll see it crossed out, you'll see what they did, so you can actually see their progress. I used to like sitting with students and saying, and pause it, and say, explain to me why you changed this sentence, because you just deleted that whole sentence. Why? And then I could actually watch it. So it's a little neat extension. It's a free extension that you can add to Google Docs. You'll need to visit the Chrome web store, and you'll need to be on Chrome to use this. And then you'll see it appear as a little box called Draftback at the top here of any Google Doc. And you load the revision, and you can actually see the process. Now, to correct C3 in Google Classroom offers you a lot of different possibilities. It works with Google Slides as well. As you can see, this is a fake student. This is my colleague, Melissa, who submitted an assignment, which is not an assignment. And here on the side, I have a place to actually write the grade, but also a place to write private comments. So I could record audio comments. I could put a video there to link, and I can actually add comments. So let's say she has a mistake here, and I want to add a comment. I could type a comment, but I could also build a bank of comments right here. So this little thing here under, I don't know if you can see, is it too small, or can you see? Here, just underneath, there's a little bubble. This is a bank of comment that you can build in advance, so you can copy and paste them quickly to correct C3 efficiently. So you could add a little comment, or let's say your students are always, you know, saying I am agree, and you're repeating every time we don't say I am agree. Well, you could actually cut and paste it and not have to retype every time. You could even link it to a video on YouTube that explains why we don't say I am agree, and so forth. So those are little tips to evaluate C3. As I said, distance learning, it's difficult to control everything, but at least it gives you a bit of info to have a discussion with students if you have doubts.
Excellent. Thank you, Alexandra. Are there any questions or comments with regards to what we've just seen with these tools? No?
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Now, it's something I'm thinking about. Not too sure yet how to go about it, but I'm hoping that, Alexandra, you can guide me on this. Thinking of possibly like a digital school newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know how to even go there, but I'm starting to do a little bit of research, and so maybe if you can have any suggestions or guidance as to
It depends what kind of tools you have and like the extent of creating that you want to do and basically the layout. I know that there's an amazing website called Slides Mania. I don't know if you know it. And she
familiar.
has a template for newspaper. I'll actually project it if I can. She has a newspaper template. It's done in Google Slides, so it's super easy to manage, to make copies, to have each student submit things and collaborate. So that would be one idea. If not, I know Canva is a great tool, but it's a step up in terms of tech with the students. You'll need to create their accounts and groups and everything else. But Canva also has like a lot of possibilities for creating posters and newspapers and everything else. It's an amazing tool, but it's more of an infographic tool where you play with images and everything. So a simple way would be to start with Slides Mania and then template. I'll put the link in the comments.
Okay.
Now,
Now,
and she has a
the other
newspaper template that looks pretty and looks like a newspaper. So
cool. Oh, excellent. Okay, my other question was along the same lines, because now I'm just thinking, how could they share? How could they share what they're doing? So now I'm thinking, old school, like maybe, a radio station, but now I'm thinking maybe podcast and getting, students to share that way.
Well, see, that's the type of project I would love to come and try out with your students if you want to, and have great tools for that. So if you want to podcasting, we can work together. So send me an email. My favorite is called Anchor for everybody's. It's very easy to create a podcast. In 20 minutes, students will have a podcast that can be out there on every platform. I personally have a podcast, and that's what I use because it's just so simple. You can record with your phone or you can record with a computer. Everything's online, super simple. I actually have a project with some of your colleagues at Leblanc in Univers Social to do podcasts. So we could totally talk.
I'm going to, that's excellent. We have one short section left to do. So then it brings you to, this is the page I want you to know that I'm here for you guys. Anything that has to do with your program of study, evaluation, or anything at all. I just can't wait to be able to get out of my office and come in to see